I'm Nara Avtandilyan. I'm an English lecturer, and I have been teaching at the universities and colleges in the Gulf countries for over 10 years. I was, at the beginning, we live in uncertain times, so I thought I can't make it to the conference, and I submitted two proposals, one face-to-face, the other virtual. So I thought, I might not get in here, but I was lucky and I'm here now at the conference. My next presentation is face-to-face. My topic today is learning by doing, project-based learning. And during this session, let me try to navigate. I'm trying to hide this. Okay, so during this session, I will introduce the basics of project-based learning, along with some tips for implementing it in the classroom. So PBL stands for acronym for project-based learning, because I will use it all the time throughout this presentation. Let me hide this. Okie dokie. Yeah. So project-based learning is often traced back to the work of John Dewey. Might call him the grandfather of PBL, the noted education researcher and advocate for progressive education back in the early 20th century. He was the one who was famous for advocating for learning by doing. That students should experience real world work, and through that work learn academic content. So that's kind of the origin of it. It sort of went underground for a while and popped up again in the 1960s with progressive education and some of the new models of teaching and learning. As far as I know, the phrase project-based learning actually began in the 80s. What is project-based learning? According to Bransford and Stein, project-based learning is a comprehensive instructional approach to engage students in sustained cooperative investigation. In other words, PBL is a teaching method that encourages learning by actively engaging in real work, in real world and personally meaningful projects. Students will typically work on a project over an extended period of time, anywhere from a week up to a semester, that engages them in a solving real world problem or answering a complex question. Then they show what they learned by creating a public product or presentation for a real audience. By working in this way, project-based learning enables students to develop deep knowledge, deep content knowledge, I can say. PBL has also been known to unleash a contagious creative energy among students and teachers, leading to increased student engagement and improved learning outcomes for all. Now, project-based learning is often differentiated by the following characteristics. I hope you can see my slides. Okay, so I categorize them in, I label them like interdisciplinary, rigorous, and student-centered. For number one, real-world challenges are rarely solved using information or skills from a single subject area. In PBL, projects require students to use content knowledge and skills from multiple academic domains to engage in inquiry, solution building, and product construction. For the second one, challenges set out in PBL often require the application of knowledge and skills, not just recall or recognition. Typically, students' first step will be to engage in a process of inquiry. This leads to deeper learning, not just of the academic content, but also the use of content in real-world applications. This then leads to the development of solutions that address the problem challenge of the project and the creation of products to communicate solutions to an audience. And the third one, in PBL, the role of the teacher, sorry, I will try to remove this so you can see. Okay, so in PBL, the role of the teacher shifts from content deliverer to facilitator, coach, or project manager. Students work independently with the teacher providing support only when needed. I'm presenting. Can I do it later? Yes, sorry. So my next slide is about the Bach Institute for Education that has done years of research on project-based learning. They explain that PBL, students investigate in PBL, with PBL, students investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex problem or challenge with deep and sustained attention. Following the research, they identified 7 elements of PBL, focused on, product design. Collectively, these elements are called gold standard PBL. These essential product design elements outline what is necessary for a successful project that maximizes student learning and engagement. So while I was teaching business English communication course at one of the universities in the Gulf, this is how I led my PBL classes in 7 phases using using this gold standard. As I said, there are 7 phases. In phase 1, I explained, I'm trying just to bring my practice, how I used it in practice. So I explained my students what is required of them in the course. The students were informed that they would engage in a group activities, both within and without the class. And the activities included conducting a fieldwork research outside the school and reporting about their work and findings in English language. Lastly, students were made to understand that they would be evaluated and assessed for the course by their participation in the group work, submitting reports, and also conducting presentations in English. In phase 2, I described the project tasks and prepared students. They were informed about the scope of the projects, the resources available to aid their learning, and also how to choose a driving question on topic for their projects. Then students were given, were given 1 week or 2, it depends on the teacher, to make their own groups. Those who could not make it by themselves, after that time were helped by me. So selection of, and phase 3 is the selection of driving questions. This is one of the most important parts of the projects. This is because the driving question is the one that allows students to function effectively in their learning. Therefore, each group was given another week to decide the topic. The topics were to relate to products, services, leisure that were unique to Adidas, that the students wished people all over the world know about. So in phase 4, students were given virtual environments such as Blackboard, Moodle LMS, and Google environment for learning and communication. They were asked to use Skype and WhatsApp tools for voice and text chat among themselves, because I was trying to, use technology, educational technology in the project-based learning. So the use of technology, which was also to help students develop 21st century skills, provided learners with regulation of their own learning, process, and easy access to information that the instructor may not be able to provide. So in phase 5, as I said, there were 7 phases based on gold standard PBL. I built knowledge, understanding, and presentation skills to address the driving question. In the classroom, students engaged in communicative tasks in a jigsaw format and presented their projects in phases using the vocabulary and grammar taught by me, and also those that they have learned through their own efforts. Their peers used an online rubric and forum to give feedback. In this phase, other methods were blended by me in order to teach students some basic grammar and vocabulary that were relevant to their in and out classwork. For example, students were taught reported speech because they had to report what staff at the project site had told them. They were also taught the differences and the appropriate use of made of, made from, for example, and made out of, since the project focused on products and services in Adidas. Additionally, they also learned how to agree, disagree, and express their opinions, because they have to express their feelings in terms of the differences between what they knew before the research and the first-hand information that they have learned in their project work. Moreover, they learned how to give direction and describe locations, because they had to describe the locations of the project sites. These language skills included some relevant vocabulary, like connecting and question words were learned and applied appropriately in the classroom. Lastly, they learned presentation skills. This included how to structure their presentation and the use of body language during presentation. In phase 6, students built their presentation based on their feelings to the driving question, and also continued to revise the language with the support of their instructor, that is me, feedback from their colleagues or peers, and also through their own efforts. A rubric was designed to enable students to participate in reviewing and giving feedback to their peers. The rubric helped in rewarding points to the students. These points were based on body language, organization of presentation, comprehensible language use. This activity was used to effectively encourage students to find the faults in their peers' presentations so that they could avoid those faults. And in the last phase, in phase 7, students presented their final findings before the class, and the best teams were selected to engage in a speech contest with their counterparts from other universities. In the contest, the students presented before guests and 3 external judges who were linguistic professors in order to select the best presentation. So I provided you with my own example, how I used gold standard PBL, like how I taught project-based learning in one of my classes using gold standard PBL. So there is also another way, this is, sorry, I did not turn my slides. This is putting PBL into practice, which I talked already about. So there is also the workshop model. You can use either gold PBL standard to teach project-based learning, or you can use the methodology called the workshop model. So the workshop model for teaching project-based learning is a way to organize. This is the second type, how to teach PBL. This is a way to organize your lessons and class time that is student-centered. It maximizes student work and practice time, focusing on practice growth and reflection while minimizing the amount of time the teacher spends in front of the classroom. So the workshop models focus on the students, allowing time for students to get messy with learning, reflect on their learning, and pursue self-driven inquiry. I think you can't see, okay. Let me just minimize. Okay, so now you can see the stages, because the workshop model focuses on the student, allowing them to, pursue self-driven inquiry, and it makes it perfect structure in which to imagine implementing PBL. So I have mentioned the stages here, like crafting the mini lesson, stage 2 composing, and stage 3 is reflection. So in stage 1, which is crafting the mini lesson, the first stage on the workshop model is when mini lessons and any whole group direction, direct instruction takes place. This is like the stage when you give directions to your students. This is the perfect time to introduce or revisit a driving question and allow students to generate a need-to-know list for the unit you are teaching or for the day. This is also when any new skills necessary to complete the project may be introduced. At the beginning of the project, students are introduced to key content in an authentic context via some stimulus or hook, which we call an entry event in PBL. Students use the entry event to initiate inquiry by reflecting on their prior knowledge of key content and then generating questions that they need to know the answer to in order to successfully complete the project. These need to know questions are used in an ongoing way throughout the project to track learning and guide inquiry. Use simple table or chart paper on or in a digital document to capture need to know questions. As you can see, there are lots of digital tools like OneNote or Walklead, virtual classroom environment where you can use boards in order to let the students know the question. So in step one, design the entry event in such a way that the key knowledge, understanding, and success skills that you plan to teach in this unit are included. This will enable students to ask the questions that you want them to answer during the project. Depending on the nature of the entry event, you might also share the driving question and the project information sheet, which offers project details to make sure students will ask questions about the key knowledge, understanding, and success skills addressed in the project. In step two, create a free column chart on a whiteboard, chart paper, or in a Google Doc. Start with what students know to activate their prior knowledge. Ask questions like, what do you already know about the task? Have them popcorn out these responses or share in chat. Capture their words in the shared space. Allow think time for students, but don't spend too much time on the no's. Students will have the opportunity to add new ideas to this list over time. Capture students' words just as they share them without editing their knowledge. Ask for clarification when necessary. If students are learning in person, you may wish to have them record their question on sticky notes, or they can record with their mobiles and post them on the board or on a chart so that you can move them as they are, as they are answered. So in step three, have students generate questions about what they need to know, address the problem, challenge, or scenario posed in the entry event, or to answer the driving question. Ask the question, what do you need to know about the topic or to do this task? Give an example of a question and then ask students to work in pairs to generate a preliminary list of questions. Again, after allowing students time to think and collaborate, capture their questions just as they pose them without editing. It is a good idea to spend more time on the need to know questions than you did on what students know, to draw out the key knowledge, understanding, and success skills that students will learn throughout the project. At this step, don't worry if some of the students' questions are irrelevant. Figuring out what they actually need to know is part of the inquiry process. Keep these questions somewhere that is easily accessible for all students to reference throughout the project. In step four, once students have exhausted their questions, move on to the next steps column. In this phase, encourage students to think about how they would initiate the process of answering these questions. You can ask, what are the very next steps you could take, should do to start answering your question? Encourage students to move beyond simple ideas like we should do research. Probe for what specifically they would like to research and how they would approach researching the question. For example, by online search, asking experts, surveying users of a product, and so on. If you have already formed teams, following next steps, you may allow them to begin this research process. You might have them track their learning in a learning log. And in the final step, include the need to know chart on the project wall and revisit and update the list frequently. Use the need to know questions to promote sustained inquiry throughout the project. So in stage two, which is, sorry, I missed this slide as well. This is how you use vocabulary and posters, and you use the infographics and you form the boards. So Okay, so in stage 2, which is a composing stage, during the composing stage, students should be set forth to work in groups, partnerships, or individually to practice the skills and concepts introduced during the mini lesson, while the teacher circulates to monitor for misconceptions, pull small groups and workshops, work with an individual student, or conduct quick formative assessments or assessments in small groups. The teacher may use formative assessment from the previous class period to pull small groups or conduct personalized workshops during this time. Helping the students become fluent in the language of a project targeted content is an essential part of teaching in PBL classroom. Project-based learning classrooms offer rich opportunities to learn and apply vocabulary in authentic and meaning-oriented ways. But this is the most powerful when PBL teachers plan intentionally for vocabulary development throughout the project. Effective vocabulary instruction begins with formatively assessing the terminology students already know, then strategically addressing those terms students do not know. Note that expressive vocabulary follows from receptive vocabulary. That is, students will be able to take in and understand language that is more complex than what they can produce. There are several schools of thought regarding the best way to introduce new vocabulary. How you choose to introduce and teach these words may vary depending on the content you are teaching and the needs of your students. So these are the ways how you can teach vocabulary. I talked about it. And as for reflection, if you remember, the first stage was the reflection stage in the workshop model. So reflection describes the cognitive processes we use to make meaning of our, of our experiences. In project-based learning, students should have regular opportunities to reflect individually and with others on both what and how they are learning, providing time and structures for reflection throughout the project transforms as the project transforms the process of doing projects into true project-based learning. As John Dewey wrote, we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. As you plan reflection for your project, consider asking students to reflect for 3 different purposes: content, what we are learning; process, how we are learning it; purposes, why we are learning this or doing this. Just like any other skills, reflection is something that needs to be taught. Provide frequent and varied structured reflection activities over the course of a project. You may even wish to have students reflect on reflection using a formative rubric to analyze and discuss aspects of effective reflective responses. Sample structures of reflection include, but are not limited to, exit tickets, where students write brief responses to prompts and turn them in the end of class, and then conducting a quick formative assessment or exit slip during this time will ensure students are growing and meeting checkpoints or benchmarks in the project. This part of the lesson is a perfect time to wrap up, to capture new learning, assess for understanding, and look ahead of future learning and tasks. So the value of workshops in PBL: learning is messy. So I will move so you can see my title. Okay, so learning is messy. PBL classrooms empowering students to drive their own learning might be messy too. Our job as teachers is to empower students to ask questions and find answers, identify problems and solve them, or come up with creative solutions. The workshop model is a class structure that allows for all of this and more. It's focused on work time, so students have the gift of time to practice new skills and apply them to the project and their product. It allows time for direct instruction, but also releases the teacher to assess, monitor, and teach personalized lessons or workshops during the composing time. Reflection time allows students to capture learning, look ahead, and allows the teacher to check for understanding and growth. So since I have a couple of minutes, I can just continue. There are 3 common PBL problems and solutions. I will just wrap up briefly. So the problems can be, can be in group dynamics, or a lack of student engagement. Students are not used to actively learn, but also there are solutions for these problems, and the teacher is the one who can, find the solutions. For example, the solution for if you can see that there is a problem in a group dynamics, the solution can be that you make all graded assignments individual tasks and don't give any grade for group work. Another solution for lack of student engagement, the solution will be put a face to the audience, make student work truly public, that will provide feedback to learners, or you can invite someone to tell students how much their speech, their search for solutions or ideas will be important for that personal organization. Also, students are not used to active learning, and the solution can be, you can include student voice about, above choice. People own their learning when they have decision making on what and how they are learning. Just give choices is a starting point. So you can just provide assessment criteria, use protocol, or have students establish norms. Like I would, and I just want to wrap up just my presentation by saying that technology and project-based learning have changed how teachers are thinking about instruction and assessment in today's classrooms. Much has been written about PBL in teaching science and art, but we found many language teachers are still wary of dipping their feet into these untested waters. Some of the teachers from my network, including myself, have been using PBL for several years, and we receive great feedback from students. Anyways, the good learning happens when students need to wrestle with ideas and struggle a little bit. So these are my references, and in case you are interested in references, you can email me and I can send my PowerPoint presentation to you, where you can find the authors. I did research based on who I did the research on the topic. Thank you very much for attending my session. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer your questions.